Hello everyone, and welcome to our final session of the day. And I'm going to do that awful thing where I introduce someone who needs very little introduction.
Right, done that then. Okay, let's get to the question.
This is Sir John Hegarty. We're going to talk about marketing.
About that man in a pink suit. He's got a more impressive suit than I've got, which is that's not fair.
Great start. So if you don't know who Sir John Hegarty is, Google him. We're gonna talk about many of the issues. If you've been here throughout the day, well done. We're going to talk about many of the issues that have cropped up during the day, as well as talk about something which, in the sessions that I've been in charge of today, I've tried to get out of the panelists to varying effects in terms of talk about creativity. We haven't talked too much about the importance of creativity, and it's still very important in marketing today. And they tell me you know a thing or two about that.
Spent my life trying to sell it, you know.
And if you can catch my eye, there'll be an opportunity to ask Sir John a question or two, but please do wave your hand vigorously because my eyesight isn't that good. So we've heard from lots of CMOs today in our Brand Leaders Club at the start of today and throughout the day in our sessions, talk about various important issues, and I've tried to distill them from what I see as number one. The role of the CMO today, in our Brand Leaders Club, we had this idea about the marketing role, even still in this day and age of media fragmentation, lots of different ways to reach consumers. The role of the marketer still being siloed in terms of the people who talk about the ads and commission the ads and buy the media, tell other people to buy the media. Not enough marketers getting involved in all the different touch points in which we reach consumers. Now, is that something that you see? And if so, how do you explain that? And how do you explain that?
Well, I think one of the failures of the British economy is that we haven't really created lots of exciting brands. And the reason we haven't done that is that because people have failed to understand, we can innovate, we can come up with ideas, and then we have failed to capitalize on that by constantly innovating, driving them, making them interesting, making them exciting. And I think there is a failure. I spent a terrifying thought, 60 years of my life with, talking to marketing directors, talking to big brands, and the failure of them to understand. The title of is The Future of Brands, all right? I'll give it to you right now. Be exciting. All right? And now let's go home. Because most of them are just boring. They're boring. And you kind of think to yourself, what is the purpose of this brand? It is to engage and excite. Engage me, I've made something interesting, I've looked at it a different way, I've come up with a different idea, and to be exciting. Because we live, the trouble with all of these conferences, they'll all be talking about marketing, and they'll be talking about marketing products. But the world out there doesn't look at it like that. They look at the world, and they see Netflix, and they see Call of Duty, or they see, Hockney at the Lightroom, or they see that, and you're just a part of it. And what you're trying to do is to become a part of their lives, to be more important. That's the essence of marketing. Be more important. And you look at great brands. You look at, Apple. Steve Jobs. And great brands are often driven by showmen, show people, show whatever you want to call them. But they get out there and they promote, and they make themselves interesting. Phil Knight, Nike, James Dyson, he made a vacuum cleaner interesting. Come on, a vacuum cleaner. When was the last time you spoke to somebody at a dinner party? If you go to dinner parties, I don't know if you do. Oh, what vacuum cleaner have you got? Oh, I've got a fantastic vacuum. But he made it interesting. And, so much of what people are doing, they're just boring. Boring. And I've spent my life trying to make clients understand this. Be more interesting. So I did it by writing, hopefully, interesting ads and interesting communication and all those things. But I was beating my head against the bloody brick wall. It was just unbelievable.
isn't it actually? Maybe it's your fault, John.
Maybe I'm to blame.
Maybe
I'm to blame. I take the blame. That's it. It's my fault.
Maybe it's the fault of people who have become very famous and made a very good living off being kind of lauded as creative rock stars and kind of, go to BBH for your advertising and all the rest of it. When actually marketers have been put in a position where we've got all these great agencies who have got creative geniuses. I just need to buy it. So are you to blame?
No, I'm trying to put that right now with my whole thing with the business of creativity, in getting businesses to understand that if you engage with creativity, you will drive your business forward. And in fact, creativity isn't something that you occasionally connect into. It is fundamental to starting a business. So you have to have an idea. That's a creative act. You have to decide what you're going to call it. That's a creative act. You have to decide how it's going to look. That's a creative act. Creativity is absolutely crucial to what you do. Crucial. Because it teaches you how to be competitive, it teaches you how to innovate, it teaches you how to interest people, it teaches you how to engage and stimulate not only the people you're talking to, but the people within your company. So it acts on all those fronts. So, and now I think, the great sort of conundrum is I think we have a very creative nation. I think we have very dull businesses. And the two have not connected.
And why is that? Where's the disconnect there?
I don't know. You go to other countries and you kind of go, there is an acceptance of it. There is an acceptance of creativity and business and that's why, maybe, you go to Italy and talk in terms of fashion. And there'll be an instant kind of connection with kind of creativity. I remember working for an Italian hotel group in the late 70s, and they talked about, the ads we were doing, they talked about what photographers were we going to use and what were they like and they were interested in it because they realized what they projected was fundamentally important. I've hardly had that conversation in this country with marketing directors. I mean, a few, I would be honest to say, but I'd count them on two hands. After 60 years, that's not very good, is it? But that's what you are. If you think about it, you've got to make yourself as interesting as the latest Bond film. If in terms of attention, that's it. Game of Thrones or whatever it might be. You've got to think like that. If you're not thinking like that, you're failing. And there's no kind of daringness in it. And I get dismayed with it. But that's what we're trying to get people to understand. I mean, creativity is also fun. And maybe it's our Anglo-Saxon thing about, couldn't have fun. Don't have that. Oh, that's dangerous fun.
With the country of Shakespeare, it was Shakespeare's birthday/death day the other day. I won't have that. What about, maybe, to play devil's advocates, maybe there's a risk aversion thing going on. We've heard a lot in the last few years about talking about purpose, the importance of brands to be allied with values that consumers can hold them to account to. I haven't heard a lot of discussion about purpose today. I mean, where do you stand, given everything you've just said about being creative and, dare I say, risky and having courage in what you're trying to do as a marketer? What about purpose? Well, how does a marketer be purposeful but also authentic?
But I think we've misunderstood that word purpose. I think people, what they've done is they've gone, oh, purpose. What's my purpose is to be part of the Me Too movement or part of Black Lives Matter or whatever it is. I constantly make sure, I've got a jar of marmalade. I want that bloody marmalade to be made from the best organic Seville oranges. I want the farmers who farm it to be paid properly. I want the transport system to be as green as it possibly can. I want the person who retails it to treat the people they work with and the people they trade with to be absolutely, to be treated fairly. And they rush off and try to be part of the Me Too movement. Forget it. Make the most incredible product you can possibly make, and that's the way you benefit society. That's the way you do it. This kind of associating yourself with something else that isn't to do with what you do is nonsense. It's just complete nonsense, and it's why you end up with Pepsi trying to be about, what was it, Black Lives Matter or something, one of them, I can't remember. And of course it blew up in their face because
you're talking about this Kendall Jenner.
Yeah, the Kendall Jenner. I mean, and you go, I'm not surprised. If they said that we've actually finally made a soda that doesn't rot people's teeth, that might be more interesting. But they haven't, have they? What they've said is, I want to associate myself with Black Lives Matter. And it or whatever, whichever one it was, I can't remember now. But it quite rightly blew up in their face. You have no right to do it. Put your own house in order. Make the best product you can possibly make it so it benefits the planet, make sure you treat people correctly, you employ them correctly, you pay whatever, the farmers, the people in your factories, all fairly, and that's purpose. That's the purpose you should have. And it's an excuse to go and I'll attach myself to something over here whilst I'm making a terrible product over here. I mean, it's cynical, isn't it? Why do we put up with it? I mean, it's just nonsense.
What about brands who are trying to forge this longer-term connection with their consumers beyond one ad campaign, where values, purpose, dare I use that word, can play a huge role in that? What that brand stands for over time beyond any ephemeral marketing campaign. I mean, you talk at the start about needing to be exciting, needing to be memorable. Don't you need to ally yourself in longer-term things and just beyond kind of a really great creative message that may get you fame?
Well, I don't see Game of Thrones going, we're going to support Black Lives Matter. I don't see, the latest Avatar movie saying we're supporting Me Too movement. They make a brilliant product, whatever you think of it. And they market it, and they talk about it, and they get people excited about it because they understand what they're there to do. We seem to have drifted off because we're afraid of what we do. We don't have a way of kind of marketing ourselves that's interesting and exciting. So we'll attach ourselves to something else on the hope that this will kind of get us noticed. And it's pathetic. I mean, it's just pathetic. And that's what brands are doing. I mean, just laughable. I mean, we're in a shocking state. We're not doing, I see very, very little out there that is growing, that is dramatic, building great brands, building them for the future, employing people, engaging people, doing great stuff that people talk about. Remember, as a brand, you've got to be a part of culture. That's what makes it interesting. That's what increases the value of what you do. I mean, that's why, I constantly admire Marmite for what they've done. I mean, dreadful kind of yeast spread that I can't bear, and yet they've turned it into this phenomena because they've kind of said, this is what we're about. You either love us or hate us. And they've turned this, it's a yeast spread, for Christ's sake, what are you talking about? And yet, it's a kind of major brand. And you look at, all these other ones that should be more important, should be more exciting. They've done it in a very exciting way.
And don't get me started on Vegemite.
That's a tricky one.
Can we have
a question from the audience there, lady in
question?
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Nick from Pink News. Just on your point there, do you not think there's a reason that brands are moving toward potentially like allyship and?
Sorry, I can't really hear you very well. Can you get a microphone
sorry. Mike's just
microphone there? Sorry, and the people back here won't be able to hear.
Yeah.
I'm Nick Keeney from Pink News. So the question I have is relating to what you've been talking about. I mean, we've seen a lot of backlash for brands like Bud Light recently for having a trans woman as part of their campaign, and Nike. And, some would say that that's important. I would say that because you're allowing for representation, we're kind of being more inclusive. But what would be your take on that?
I'm really sorry. I'm finding it very difficult to hear you.
What about now?
That's better.
Okay, so I'm Nick Keeney from Big News. So my question, to summarise, it's about brands aligning themselves with issues like Black Lives Matter, and also recently we've seen Bud Light getting a lot of backlash for having a trans woman representing their brand. So do you not think that it's actually important for those brands to be aligning with issues that represent and affect a lot of us, or you think they should stay out of it completely?
Yeah, okay, yeah. I don't mind a brand doing that. It's not my business. They do what they want to do. All I'm trying to say to you is put your own house in order first. And they're not doing that. And I see they're using an attachment to something else as a kind of an excuse for not doing what they should be doing. And I love inclusivity. I mean, creativity is about inclusivity. I mean, the very purpose of advertising is to talk to as many people as you possibly can. You know, one of the reasons I went into advertising, because I went to art school, from art school to design school, is that suddenly, instead of, you know, if I was going to be a painter, I had a canvas. Instead of that, I had a 48-sheet poster. That was the most exciting thing to me in the world. All of a sudden, I was speaking to thousands of people. Inclusivity is fundamentally important, but I'm very wary of cynicism. And I think our audience, in the end, spots cynicism. And I think that's what I'm trying to say brands can't be. And when you've done what you should be doing correctly, then you have a right to go and lecture to somebody else and to say what you're doing. And we can see how it comes unstuck. And we're focusing on the wrong things. You should naturally include those people. Your employment policy should be to include those people, to represent them wherever they want to be represented. It isn't, oh, I'm going to shove, you know, somebody who's, you know, got a disability into an ad and say, aren't I great? Look, you know. I mean, I think it's demeaning. I think it's demeaning to the people with a disability, and I think it's demeaning to people who applaud it.
On the diversity piece, we've also heard a lot today about talent and various issues within the industry across certain parts about talent retention, lack thereof. I mean, you mentioned very briefly about how you got into this industry yourself. Do you look at how people are coming into the industry or not coming into the industry as a warning sign for how diverse the ideas that are coming through, in terms of how diverse the people that are coming through into this industry? I'm getting at, is this industry as diverse as it should be in order to capture all of those diverse ideas?
Well, the first thing to say is creativity thrives on diversity. That's the first thing you've got to understand. More diversity creates more opportunity. And that, in my mind, makes organizations, companies more interesting and more engaging. The reason, I mean, I think people are not coming into this, and it's a real worry. I don't think people are coming into this industry the way we need them to be coming into this industry, and I talk about marketing and advertising, because they look at it and they go, it's not very good. It isn't creating great work. Nobody's really talking about it. You know, why would I go there when I can go into gaming or, you know, go and work for, you know, umpteen dozen other different companies? There are many more opportunities. So our industry has to be more competitive in how it appeals to people. But, you know, with an organization that has a real kind of sense of where it wants to go, and it has ethics at its core, you will attract people and you will hold on to people. And this goes back to my point about purpose. What is your purpose? And it's look at the organisation you're in, look at what they're doing, look at how they behave. You know, we've just seen what's happened with the CBI, which is completely blown up because it doesn't know how to treat people. You know, shocking. I mean, just appalling. I mean, I'm glad to say I'm no longer a part of BBH. I'm not there anymore. But, you know, we had great ethical kind of attitudes to all kinds of things, of how you treated people, how you engage with them, how you encourage people. You know, Nigel Bogle's line was, none of us are as good as all of us. And it was very much believed within the company. And that reason we attracted, and I think they still do, attract great people.
So going back to your point about the need to be famous, the need to be exciting. I mean, we've just, in this room, we've had a whole series of debates and talks about media measures and, you know, marketers navigating this increasingly fragmented media ecosystem, where frankly it's harder for that big idea, that big famous exciting idea, to reach people in the same way as it was before, when, you know, we all watched Coronation Street or whatever on Monday, Wednesday, Friday nights, and we all talked about it the next day, I assume, don't know. But how an increasingly fragmented media system, how can marketers actually harness that big idea?
Well, you know, I always laugh when I get this question. We've always had a fragmented media landscape. It's always been there. I can remember having this conversation in 1984 when somebody said, it's a very fragmented media company, very difficult to get to people. How are you
more fragmented?
We'll have a bigger, better idea. Elon Musk doesn't worry about this, does he? So he launches a car and he launches it into space. It's a great way of launching a car, isn't it? I'll put it into space and he gets onto every news channel around the world. What a great piece of media buying that was, because it was a creative thought. He had an idea. And so if you want to succeed in this world, then your idea's got to be bigger. It's got to be better. It's got to be more consistent, and it's got to be true to who you are. And that way, that consistency will come through and people will begin to talk about it. I mean, I find this always amazing is how much, how often do we talk, it comes up to Christmas and we get big articles about, the retailers' ad campaigns, and it, front page of The Guardian goes the latest campaign for, John Lewis. I go, what's going on here? It can be done because they think imaginatively. Now, whether they're right with what they did last, I don't know, but they're doing it. There's an example. And everybody says to me, oh, it's a terribly fragmented market. You can't talk to anybody anymore. And it's bullshit. It's complete bullshit. Your focus is what you need. Focus on something. Have a point of view. And that emanates out. And that spreads to everybody else. But you stand for something and people begin to talk about you. The best advertising in the world. Word of mouth. We all know. But, everybody gets obsessed with the problem, not with the opportunity. I look at it completely differently. I say it is easier today to start a brand and turn it into a success than it was 40 years ago. I can instantly get onto social media, I can do something interesting, I can do something daring, and I can get out there. And then you have to make the next step. How do I go from that audience to a bigger audience? But you're building success. So it's much easier today than it was when I first came into the industry a million years ago. So when people say to me, if you surround yourself with people who see problems, you'll never get solutions. Surround yourself with people who see opportunities. I bet Elon Musk doesn't talk about, media fragmentation. I don't know what the fuck I'm going to do. Oh, it's so bloody difficult.
You just buy a social media company.
Well, biggest mistake he's made.
So going back to the point,
make mistakes,
going back to the point you made right at the start, too many boring ads, too many boring brands, too many boring marketers. But yet, what you've just said, it's never been easier to launch this exciting brand. The media system's never been more fertile for that.
Well, that's the conundrum, isn't it?
What's the problem?
I think it's...
Okay, let me ask this a different way. So, you've got this...
Could you get the same answer?
No, you've got this... Probably not exactly the same. You've got this business of creativity. So let me put it to you this way. When people are coming onto your course, what are the things that people are telling you? Sir John, you've got to help me with ... Fill in the blanks.
Well, first of all, what we do with the business of creativity course is get people to understand creativity. Define it. I bet, if I went around this room and said, would you define creativity for me? A bit like defining love, it's all very personal. But there are definitions, and the more you know about it, the more at ease you'll be. And then when you've defined it, there are two types of creativity, pure and applied. So you understand certain people are good at one type of creativity, other people are good at other types of creativity. And then once you understand that, you begin to engage with it much more. And then once you feel relaxed about it, I always liken it, if you couldn't drive and I said to you, I've got a Lamborghini outside, here are the keys, I'm not getting into that, I don't know how to drive a car. And it's the same, if you don't understand creativity, if you don't understand how to define it, it's very important, this. You don't understand the two types of creativity. You don't realize that we are all creative. That's what separates us out from the animal kingdom, Dogs don't get up in the morning and go, I'm going to have a terrible day, my hair's not right, They don't, They just get up and go, I'm going to eat out of that bowl, I'm going to go for a walk and sniff somebody's bum. So understanding all of these things helps us. And creativity teaches us and engage, and it's fun. And it teaches you how to innovate, how to, as I've said, I constantly say this, how to drive a better business. And it engages with people. So it's a fantastic thing to understand. And the more you understand it, the better you'll be. And I think our problem is, going back to your question, is that we have a, you know, it was, I think it was one of the great artists said that the British, the English look at pictures with their ears. They want logic. And we're kind of got this strange schism. We have brilliant creativity in this country. It's the thing that's going to help us succeed, but we don't have businesses engaging with it. And I think it's a tragedy. And it will be our undoing. It's been a success. You know, in the 1970s, there were more art schools in London than the whole of Italy. Now, kind of, you know, all of the music revolution that came out of the 60s and 70s was, you know, you look at it, so much of it was art school based, that creativity that came out. You know, James Dyson went to art school. And, you know, it was a tremendous ground for training people, helping people experiment, have fun, do things, try that, try this. And it encourages us to do these things. People have always been suspicious of it. And what we've got to do, which is what we're trying to do with the business of creativity, is get them to understand, no, this is the thing you've got to engage with. This is what's got to bring you together with creativity. Not be suspicious of it, not look at it as so it's something that's just going to cost me money. It is crucial. It is like breathing. You know, we don't, you know, that's how we survive. And if you're not creating, you're dying. That's the thing to remember as a business.
Does anyone have any questions? We have a question here.
Ladies' hand up
We've got one over there afterwards. We've got one at the back. So we're going to, we'll come to everyone. We'll come to everyone.
Hi, my name is Chloe. I'm Head of Social Impact at Lucky Generals.
Yeah, can't hear you, so I've got terrible hearing.
Hi, my name is Chloe. I'm Head of Social Impact at Lucky Generals.
Very good.
I wonder how you tackle accessibility. So in talking about this depth of creative people, especially when you see, like you said on social media, a creative person can take their whole business and set it up online now in a way that they wouldn't necessarily come to us. And the work that you're doing, how do you tackle the accessibility depending on the background that you come from? Not that you're not a creative, but access to be able to become part of this industry. How do you look at it through that lens? Because I agree with you, there's so much creative talent. But depending on the marginalised identities that you carry, whether you can actually access our industry in the first place is such a big issue.
Yeah. Well, the first thing you've got to do is you've got to have a government that understands this and encourages people to explore. We don't have a government that does that. You know, they want everybody to study maths. It's very nice, up to the age of 18, very good. You know, that's okay if you're good at maths. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is the educational system. We have to look at that and to make people understand there is an opportunity outside of becoming a footballer or a TikTok star or whatever it might be that you might want to do. So information, knowledge is fundamentally important. And I think actually, I'm also chairman of a influencer company called Whaler. And actually, influencers are a very, very interesting new development. Anybody can become an influencer. There are no bars to entry. You can do it. It is the most diverse, the most involving, the most kind of interesting area because the gatekeepers have been taken away. You develop your own audience and then you sell the ability to talk to that audience to whoever wants to talk to them. So I think we have to have policies. We have to, and I'm sorry to get political, but it is important. You can't ignore it. You know, it's what drives and helps, you know, maintain our ability to compete. So you've got to have a government that accepts it and wants to promote it and wants to get schools to kind of go, you know, this is how you teach. I mean, we're teaching kids today as though we're going into the industrial age, not the information age. And that's one of the great tragedies. So it's a good question with a huge, broad answer that, you know, we're not going to solve in this room immediately. But in other words, what I'm saying is vote the Tories out. Sorry, anybody who doesn't like that, you can leave. I don't give a shit.
Don't leave.
And get somebody who's going to sort it out.
Thank you for your question. There was one at the front here.
Hi, Sir John. I'm Emma from Tesco Media. Quite a simple, well, maybe a simple question. What brands do you most admire and why?
What brands do I most admire? That's a very good question, actually. I kind of a whole range of them. I really admire Paul Smith. I think it's very interesting how he sustained a fashion empire starting in 1976, and he's still at the cutting edge. I really admire that. I think HBO is a phenomenal brand, creating great programming. I actually do value the BBC, despite the fact this despicable government is trying to destroy it. I really think they are phenomenal. So those are the brands
Those are all sexy brands. What about boring brands, or more consumer packaged goods brands?
They don't resonate with me. The brand I really admired was Oakley, which was a great. People said to me, "Give me an example of a great piece of advertising recently," and this is now 4 years ago, slightly pre-pandemic. And I thought was amazing what they did is that they turned an oat milk into this phenomenal brand. I mean, defined how the market should behave. Everybody's copied them. They went to eventually the States and IPO'd for something like $10 billion. Not quite so much anymore. But I thought it was really interesting what they did, and they did it in a very, very conventional way. They got great ideas, they put them out there, they were daring, they were exciting, and they gave you a sense of, we talked about this. I think actually really interesting brands think like movements. They're not just a brand, they're a kind of movement. I'm going to change the way everybody responds to this particular marketplace. So I think that was quite interesting with them. You felt, milk for humans, not cows, was one of their lines. And they did it in a very interesting way, the packaging, the way it all went through, double-page spreads in newspapers. It was like a marketing campaign from 1978. But, IPO'd for $10 billion in the US. They didn't worry about, fracturing or, that. So I think I did like that, although I don't like oat milk. But, I noticed it.
Don't have to. She's from Tesco. I think she wanted you to say Tesco because of the BBH thing, but never mind. Is there a question from here? And then Jackie had one. No? Done? No?
Hi, I'm Jackie from Havas Media. My question was, when it comes to the crap work, who do you hold more accountable, advertisers or agencies?
Who do I
hold more accountable?
Who accountable?
The agency or the marketer?
Well, I think they're both accountable. Seriously, I think you've both got to make a stand. You've got to both say, look, we can't go on doing this. This is just shit. And it's ruining our reputation. And we want to be here for the next 20 years. We did have that kind of policy at BBH that in the end, we tried and tried and tried. And if they didn't do it, we said, look, I think you're in the wrong place. You don't go into a Rolls-Royce showroom and say, I want to buy a Skoda. If you want to buy a Skoda, go to the Skoda showroom, And I think, again, the problem with advertising agencies is that they try and be all things to all people. And they themselves are most appalling at being a brand, except they're giving brand advice all the time. They're shocking. I don't understand a brand. It's just like... And, my partner Nigel always used to say, the trouble with advertising agencies is they're all on Oxford Street and nobody's in Bond Street. And it was such a simple observation, and they are trying to be all things to all people. You can't be. You can't be. It is impossible. But advertising agencies giving out brand advice think they can be.
Question at the front here. Thank you.
Hello. I find it very difficult to be creative when I'm consuming a lot of information. So I find consuming ideas and producing ideas to be a bit of a contradiction. And I was wondering, in the information age, do you have tips, hacks, how to stay creative while being inundated with so much information all the time, which is, it's necessary for the jobs we do, but how do you still stay creative?
Well, very good question. I think, first of all, as I said, we are all creative. I think that you've got to understand how to filter. I always loved that line, which is only read great things because it might rub off. And I used to say to all my creative people, you know, if you read shit, you'll think shit, you'll create shit. So I think you've got to start filtering. And you're just going to go and look at great stuff. Be inspired by things. Be inspired by great work. And then you'll do better work. But if you're watching crap, you'll turn out crap. They will. I mean, it's just, you know, it will happen to you. It filters in without you realizing. You've got to remember, we are all, so look, we're all creative. Some of us are now living by it. But great creative people absorb stuff all the time. They're absorbing it in, and then it comes back out. And then you have an idea, and you realize you've got all these references and all these influences, and it comes back out. There's a great book to read, which is on Leonardo da Vinci by Walter Isaacson. A fabulous book. And he was like that. He was inquisitive. He'd chat to people and talk to them why they were doing things. And why did you do that? Why was that? But he was just engaging with interesting stuff. And that way, you know, apart from the fact that he was a genius, he came up with all the things that he did. But he didn't not engage, but he chose who to engage with. So if you're sitting there with all this stuff coming in, then, you know, you're just going to be overwhelmed by it. But just, you know, decide. And don't just, you know, do lots of things. You know, for some bizarre reason, I read the Financial Times. There's only about 3% of it I understand. But occasionally, I get a great article in the FT that I wouldn't have got somewhere else. And therefore, I've got a competitive edge over other creative people. So read stuff that other people wouldn't read, but good stuff. And it rubs off. You get better.
Just be more Da Vinci. I'll bring in Ollie in just a second.
There's a lady right at the back who's got her hand up there.
I will get to questions. Now I'm scared. But before I do, I can't not follow up with that with a question about AI. You must get questions all the time on your Business of Creativity course about AI. Lots of us have been talking about AI today in terms of creative solutions, how you use AI to be more creative. Endless stories about should creatives be fearful about AI. How do you see artificial intelligence, machine learning in terms of how it can augment creativity?
Well, I mean, creativity is always engaged with technology. You know, from the beginning of time, technology has been fundamental to creativity, because without it, we'd be able to tell each other a story, sing a song, and that will be it. But whoever invented the piano, it was phenomenal. It moved music on. The same with all areas of creativity. So here we've got AI, which is, you know, another tool. People are talking about generative AI. Is it going to start doing the thinking? And I go, I mean, I genuinely don't know, but I don't know how a computer is going to walk down the road and see something and go, that's interesting, I could use that. You know, I could actually, and that filtering sense that it will go on. So I do, you know, I'm cursed as an optimist, even though you might think I'm not when I talk about marketing directors. Because I think it could be an incredible tool. I think I view it as a tool. And I think, God, I can do that. It can take that task from me. I can make it do that better. And, you know, and so I view it in that way. Generative AI, which is the sense of people are talking about, it will literally, you know, go forward and it will be thinking before you've actually thought of something. I've got no idea. But, you know, let's engage with it. Let's not kind of put the barriers up and say it's all rubbish. And nobody knows, actually, in the end. I sort of think we'll look back in 10 years' time and go, that was all a bit silly, wasn't it? You know.
That's never happened in this industry before.
No.
Okay, let's do some quick fire questions. We had 3 here.
Lady, right at the back there.
Where's the mic?
Where's the mic?
Ah, good. Yeah. Hi.
Hello, Vicky Hanley, brand comms at Lloyds Banking Group. So a question for you I have is, what creative advice would you give to an industry that's perceived by customers as transactional and maybe, in your words, quite a boring sector?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, finance has always been, it's bizarre with finance, isn't it? It's fundamental to our existence because without it, we can't do the things we want to do, and yet we don't want to engage with it. And I think that you know, banks have been very, very bad at understanding how to kind of have an interesting conversation with their audience. And this is possibly why all these new banks have come along and have engaged with people, and they talk to them in a different way. And I think if I was in the financial area, I'd be very worried about what these new banks are doing. They're certainly engaging with me in a way which I hadn't sort of thought about before. And so, you know, I'd be looking at them and going, wow, what are these people doing that we're not doing? So it's been a perennial problem, but you've got to make people. And the other side of it is perhaps just go out and tell people you're going to be unbelievably boring because I'm going to make sure your cash is okay. That'd be quite an interesting proposition, wouldn't it? I am unbelievably boring, but I make sure your cash is all right. I go,
someone's doing that after the credit crunch.
I buy that. I buy that. Yeah.
I'll make sure everyone who wants to ask a question.
Yeah. I think there was someone at the back first, isn't it? Or should I go?
You go first and we'll get...
Yeah, right at the back. This lady at the back needs a microphone.
Oh, no, you have the mic, you go, and then... Yep. You go.
Jack, if you can you hear me?
Well,
no? All right.
There goes the microphone. Sorry, you'll get it
back. So polite.
Hi, nice to meet you. My name's Amara. We're here. We're from a creative agency, so we're actually on agency side. Do you have any tips for convincing the marketing side? Love all of you guys in the room, but like it's quite a risk-averse bunch. Do you know what I mean? Do you have any tips for trying to convince a risk-averse bunch on the benefits of creative, like especially when... You know when you're the junior creative in the room and you're burning because you know that this work is going to change everyone's life, but
of course.
You're facing someone who's thinking about the ultimate bottom line. Like, do you have any credible... Yeah.
Well, there are things you can do. Now, the first thing is you're talking partly about the art of selling and you're talking about the use of words. Now, there's one word I would never, ever use, and that's risk. Because when you use the word risk in a meeting, you see the people who you're selling to lean backwards. And when they lean backwards, you know you're in trouble. Because they don't want to be risky. Nobody does. It's bullshit. You know, all these management books saying, you know, you've got to be risky, adopt risk, and all that. It's just complete nonsense. So I would go back to a word I used right at the beginning and talk about excitement. This could be exciting. This could be really good. And the other thing to do is the failure I've seen when clients always wanted creative people to sell their work to them. They didn't realize that often they're dreadful salespeople. They might be brilliant at coming up with ideas, but often they're dreadful salespeople. And I've seen them lose an idea because they talk to the person they're selling to in terms of their words, not the words that the person you're selling to is using. So the trick, if you want to call it a trick, is to actually talk to them, understanding what they're saying, understanding and using their words to say, I've solved this problem. And that way you might get them to buy what you do. But if you go in saying, this is really cool, it's going to change, you know, then it's all over. You know, the game's up.
Sales training for everyone.
Yeah.
Final question.
By the way, really good segue. Half stolen question probably by you, so really nice. So I'm Olia. I'm actually doing your program right now, The Business of Creativity, week 5.
There you go.
So yeah.
Oh, good.
Great, love it. But I feel like it's a great program for people who are ready for it, people who want to change things. But being a part of traditional organization, and traditional marketing organization, I'm wondering how would you encourage, challenge those traditional marketers to be more exciting and less boring?
Well, you've got to, you know, the reason, thank you, that's a good question. I mean, the reason I called it The Business of Creativity is I didn't want to use another creative work, you know, the excitement of creativity. I don't know, yeah, fine, all right. To get people to understand that it is about business. This is about your business. And this, of course, if you're more open to it, you're engaged with it, then I think you'll get even more out of it. Just my analogy with, you know, driving a Lamborghini, if you can really drive, you're really going to get more out of it, aren't you? But I'm trying to get, and you know, we haven't necessarily succeeded, obviously, is to get business people to go, this is crucially important. I may not be the person doing it, but to get them involved, which is why at the end of each session we interview somebody from the world of business, of what they've done, and showing how they have constantly innovated, constantly accepted new ideas, and how they've driven their business forward using creativity. So, yeah, you could be right. It could be, you know, I could perhaps do something more for people going, I don't understand creativity and I'm never going to engage with it. But it's hard that. You've got to start, you start picking up the easy fruit first and then you grow, then you get further and further.
I suppose I know what you're saying about the business. It's just more people in the marketing as well. It's just there's people in the marketing. I feel like explaining it to financial director is one story, but explaining it to your own marketeers, making them more brave, how would you do that? Well, you think that they should be open to it naturally, but they aren't.
Well, that's a real problem, isn't it?
But I think you were talking about the brands. I think it's probably the reality of a lot of brands.
Yeah. It's too interesting of a question for right at the end, because unfortunately we do have to wrap up. Thank you so much. Really good questions, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sir John, for your time. And thank you, most of all, for attending. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well done.